making sense of making records. For him, it's easy as pie. It's making records with Eric Valentine.
Welcome back to Making Records with Eric Valentine. As you can see from the title, we are going to dive into the wild and woolly world of guitar tuning. But before we do that, a couple quick things. First, I want to say thank you for all the amazing comments on the last episode, the health and happiness one. It was just a really cool conversation that came out of that in the comments, and I'm glad that one seemed like it was useful for some of you, and because I wasn't sure, it's not really specifically about audio or anything, but I think no less important. It's certainly been a journey for me trying to find my way and find a good balance for everything. And there's like a couple of things that a couple of comments that came in that I thought would be good to address, because so much of where I was navigating with all that stuff was about being, it's like a healthy moderation on things. And if you get really extreme in one way or the other, that's when, in my experience, things tend to go wrong. And I talked about fasting, and there was one comment that I think is good to acknowledge, that just cautioning me to be careful about advocating for fasting, because that is a pretty extreme thing to do. And I didn't really talk in detail about the type of fasting that I've done, which is not really actually a full-on fast, where you're just drinking water for 5 days. It's actually, it's this program called Prolon, where it's called fast mimicking or something like that. And so it's supposed to trigger your body to go into, to trigger what the potential benefits are for fasting without actually fasting. So again, it is sort of a moderate version of that, where you are eating food every day. It's just a small amount of very specific things, only about 500 to 600 calories a day. So I thought I'd throw that out there, because I think it's a reasonable caution to advise on there. So there's that. And then the other thing was, on the previous episode, I got a bunch of comments. This was on the Taking Back Sunday one, where on the audio examples where I was A-Bing things, everybody pointed out that it's kind of hard to hear the A-Bing when I'm talking, and there's a ducker that's turning down what we're listening to. So I hear you loud and clear. It's a resounding shut the fuck up while you're A-Bing stuff. And you're totally right. It's completely obnoxious when, the audio source is getting turned down. So I'm going to try and do that. I don't know if there's any A-Bing going on. There might be a little bit on this one. And just turn off, well, for starters, just shut the fuck up. And then not duck the music at all, so while A-Bs are happening, so it's easier to check that out. So thank you for the feedback on that. I'll get it right. People had actually commented on that before. I was trying to fix it before. I forgot about it. I don't know. I like to talk, so there you go. So as always, if you find this video or any of the videos helpful for you, I'm still doing this sort of tip jar approach to this thing, and so you can just kind of tip as you go. If you find the information in this one useful, by the time you get to the end of it, then you can throw me a little tip. Here, I'll put up the little Venmo, PayPal things right now, and you can just scan that with your phone with either of those apps, and it'll connect you directly with the accounts I set up for this YouTube channel, and give me a little tip. Much appreciated. Thanks for all the generosity that's come in so far. It's awesome. Definitely helps keep it going. So with all that, let's just dive in. So guitar tuning, man, this is a roller coaster ride of mechanical physics, trying to get guitar tuning to behave at all. And it's been a real journey for me to get to a place where I feel like I at least understand what's going on. It's been confusing and frustrating for a long time, and I feel like now it's actually mostly just frustrating. So at least I'm not totally confused about it, but it is still frustrating because guitars are just super unwieldy with tuning. I just did a round of touring with Grace, this super stripped down skeleton crew thing where these are like these drive-in shows that are specifically designed to be socially distanced and safe for everybody to come and see live music. So some of them, people are, in their cars and they come and see a show. Some of them, you don't have to stay in your car, and they just set up these sort of, predetermined sort of squares, and you got to stay in your square and not, intermingle with anybody else. And so we went and did that, and the only way to really make it work, because the ticket sales are much less because everybody's sort of spread out and all that stuff, was Grace did them solo, and we just did them just as our family. And so everybody was wearing a lot of hats. It was just me, Grace, Sagan, and one assistant that was helping us. And so it's 4 people doing the tour, and one of them is 2.5 years old. So he was less than a help. He's actually ties up one of the 3 adults at all times whenever he's awake. So, Grace was the performer, singer, guitar player, keyboardist, the driver. She loves to drive, so she was driving our truck and the trailer that we were towing, and I was helping with being a tour manager and tuning guitars and helping set up. I was a roadie. I was doing all that stuff. So I did a lot of guitar tuning for this 2-week-long stretch of shows, and it was interesting having to get back into that and try and really get these things so when she grabbed a guitar, it's going to be in tune for her, for the songs that she's playing. And it is complicated. I think there were nights where I got it really, really great and the tuning felt amazing, and there were some nights where it just was not cooperating for a variety of reasons that we're going to get into. Probably for a lot of experienced guitar players out there that you've been playing guitar for years or decades or whatever, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about is probably things you already know. So I just want to throw that out there in advance. I think there may be a few tricks and details in here that you may not have crossed paths with, but if you're a guitar player and you've been playing for a long time, a lot of this is probably going to be things that you already know. I think this is going to be mostly useful for folks that work in the studio that aren't guitar players. So if you're an engineer or a producer or whatever, and you're in the position of having to help people capture performances, a lot of times you have to help them tune their guitars and get the guitar in tune. I found that for myself, that it just became a huge issue. And so I found myself in this position of really being the guitar tech. Because there's some guitar players, and regardless of what level they're at, that really either never wanted to, never needed to, for whatever reason, are not really that into dealing with the tuning of their guitars. And so some folks really understand tuning, are very particular about how they want to tune their guitar. They know their instrument really well. They can get it behave for themselves. I can let them do it, and it's great. But there's some that are not like that. Even a guitar player like Slash, I mean, for a very, very long time now, he's been working with guitar techs. And so when he goes on stage, he does not tune his guitars. And I think he's been using guitar techs in the studio a lot. And he brought a guitar tech in for a lot of the recording that we did. And then there was a portion where there was stuff that just he and I did. And then there was a studio assistant that I had that was also doing guitar tech stuff for him. And so he very rarely was the person that wanted to deal with, like when it got out of tune, he would just hand that guitar to somebody else. And so, so at that point, somebody's got to know what they're doing. And I think this could be very helpful for people that have not been playing guitar and need to help somebody tune an instrument. Somebody like Chris Thiele, in this case it's a mandolin, but he also played a lot of acoustic guitar and stuff at times on the records I did. He likes to tune his own instrument. He's extremely particular and very precise in how he tunes his instrument. He's very familiar with all the issues, all the mechanical issues, and how it gets affected when you grab the strings and all of those things, so everything will fall into place and sound very musical when he's playing it. So it can vary a lot with different people. And if you find yourself in a spot where you're in charge in tuning and you're not a guitar player, I think this will be helpful for you. So the other thing is like that I know is going to come up is the Evertune system. And it's an amazing system. I have not actually installed it on any guitars. I'm very aware of it. I've talked to the folks that have developed the whole thing. I was going to put it on another instrument of mine recently. I ended up not needing it. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be going over, dealing with a regular guitar, can be resolved by the Evertune system. There's a producer guy named Sam Pura. He did the Story So Far record that I mixed, and he uses the Evertune system, and he said it just like changed his life. He doesn't let people play their own guitars. He has it installed on some guitar, a variety of guitars that represents usually what people are looking to use, and it's like, just use these because we won't be sitting here tuning all the time. So I just want to throw that out there. I know people are going to mention it. It's an amazing system. There are some, there's some compromises there. Like it has to be actually physically, mechanically installed on your guitar. It requires some routing. You have to have somebody who really knows what they're doing. If you have a vintage instrument that's very valuable, you may not want to do that and route it out and install this thing on there. From what I understand, in almost every case, it's not just a drop-in replacement. It's a real thing to put that in there. So there's that, and there are certain issues with guitar tuning that it does not address, which is part of what we're going to be going through here. Part of what there was a certain point where I had this realization about different tuning intonations and so, like, I think in the All American Rejects episode, Nick talks about it a little bit, that after working on that record with me, he's been ruined forever with using these different tuning intonations for particular intervals. So that's one thing that the Evertune system can't address, because you have to tune differently for different chords. So there's that, and also the last thing, and then we'll be able to get into this a little more, is that being a little bit out of tune isn't necessarily bad. I think I was pickier about it in the past, and I was at this sort of default attitude that like being more in tune is always better all the time, and the more in tune you are, the better the music's going to be, and that's not actually necessarily true. I think I could come up with a huge number of examples of music that is not in tune and would probably be less compelling and feel less powerful if it was perfectly in tune. There's tons of stuff that's not perfectly in tune on Led Zeppelin records, old Stax records, old Motown records, all over the place. There's stuff that's not perfectly in tune and feels incredible. Old Beatles records, if you listen to like the Abbey Road record, there's stuff out of tune all over the place on that record, and it still feels incredible. And I think there are some things about it that make it feel more intense when things get pushed sharp as you're playing harder or singing more intensely. It just conveys the intensity of that in the pitch of what's being performed. So just want to throw that out there as well. Being perfectly in tune is not necessarily always the goal. And I've gotten a little bit more tuned into that reality, and so I can pick and choose when I want things to really be in tune and when I can let things breathe more, and when the music actually benefits from that emotionally. So there you go. There's all the sort of preamble about what we're going to be doing. So let's start getting into what all of these issues are. Guitars are very challenging. There's a lot of mechanical physics that go into getting a metal wire to vibrate at a very specific pitch. So I have just a cheap little what is this Epiphone SG here that we're going to be using as our example. This is not a particularly expensive guitar. And so let's just start talking about how this thing, deals with tuning. So one of the problems, that you run into when you're tuning a guitar is that there are these anchor points that sort of define the scale of the guitar. And so there's an anchor here at the nut, and there's an anchor here at the saddles of the bridge. And Gibson's, this headstock style right here, and this is part of why I chose this guitar, is particularly vulnerable to having things stick at the nut because of the angle of the string. And so if you look like at a Fender Strat, they, I think, came up with something that makes a little more sense, where the tuning pegs are aligned in one row, and they line up better with the slots in the nut where the string goes through, and so you don't have this angle. And this G string on this type of headstock is just an unbelievable pain in the ass. And what's happening is if you're tuning the instrument, and here I'm going to get my little tuner up here. Let's see if I can do that. There it is. Look at that. Okay, that's schmancy. We'll talk about this tuning amp a little bit in a second. So I think actually the first thing is that in general, I think it's always better to tune up to a note, okay? And it's because of this nut issue. And so if you start off with this G string being flat, let's say, so there we're way flat, you want to turn the speaker down. You want to tune up to this note. So we're going to tune up to G. Well, I never thought I'd be making a video of myself tuning a guitar. This is kind of hilarious, but hopefully it's useful. Okay, so if we tune up to G, there we are, we're damn close. When you start playing the instrument, and let's say you bend a note, it may go down a little bit because there's a little bit of tension that gets hung up here, but you don't lose a whole lot. Look what happens if I start sharp and I start trying to tune down to this note. There we are, we're pretty close. If I start playing the instrument, bend a note, look what happened. I mean, it goes wildly out of tune. That's because there's this reverse tension here that gets hung up right at the nut. And so when you're trying to release tension on the string, there's this friction in this nut that is holding some of that tension, holding that release back from actually fully releasing the tension onto the string where you're playing it. And as soon as you pull on the string, it goes completely out of tune. So tuning up to the note is definitely better. So we'll try and get back up there. Sorry, it's a little hard for me. My display, this tuner is so tiny, I can just barely see it. Okay, so there we are. It went down a little bit. Barely at all. You can bend the note, it doesn't go completely out of tune. So tuning up to the note, very, very important. If you're not a guitar player and you didn't know that, anybody who's a guitar player is going to know that. So then, let's see. The other thing that I ran into at a certain point, and it sort of depends on how the instrument's being played, like if there's a trem bars and stuff like that. So like if you, let's say with this G string, and it's sort of associated with this whole thing. So let's say I'm bending notes on other strings, which pulls the neck forward a little bit, everything interacts on this. All the strings interact. And so what can happen is you'll release enough tension here that it'll slip at the nut, and all of a sudden the string can go sharp a bunch when you start playing, especially if you're using a trem bar. And so I would do this thing with Greg Camp, because he would be doing a lot of surf guitar stuff where he's using the trem bar, and where we would tune the guitar up to a certain point and then push a little bit here to get it the rest of the way. And so I'll add a little more tension and then add it there. A little more tension. Add it there. There we go. And so, because there's been times where the G string, I would get it in tune, and as soon as you start playing, it would go sharp. Something would happen in the performance that would release tension here. It would slip through the nut and get caught in there, and then just go sharp. And so, if the performances are causing that to happen, you can just do it in advance, and it'll stay in tune better. So that's another trick for keeping this G string from going sharp. So then, the other thing that I noticed at a certain point when I was working with guitar players is I would sit down with the guitar, get everything exactly perfectly in tune, spend, a good couple minutes just checking every string. We want to get it exactly right. It's a little bit off here. Da, 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 da. And then I would hand them the guitar, and all of a sudden it'd be totally fucking out of tune again. It's like, what the hell happened? This thing was just in tune. And what I didn't realize until this moment was that the position that you hold the guitar in makes a huge difference with the tuning of the guitar. Check this out. So if I just lean back, it just went 12 cents sharp. And that's what was happening. The player was relaxing on the couch, sitting like this, and when I was tuning the guitar, I was sitting like this, really focused on the tuner. The other thing is, like, if they're wearing a strap, the tuning will change if you're wearing a strap versus holding it in your lap. It can be different that way as well, especially depending on where the strap is connected to the guitar. And so you have to tune the guitar in the identical situation that it's going to be played in, or it will change. If you get it in tune like this, the player's got to play it like this. As soon as they lean back, it goes sharp by a lot. That's an out of tune guitar. It will definitely not sound right. So so that's really important. So one of the other things is, you'll notice when you're playing parts. So this, let me get this thing so it's back in tune here. Okay, there we go. So when you're playing around the guitar, you'll notice that depending on how you grab the guitar and do stuff on the instrument, it can pull the note in or out of tune. And one of the things that's a real problem is when you're sliding up or down on the string, because you're grabbing and pushing tension on the guitar. And so if you're pushing the string in this direction, it's going to make it go flat. So you can see there, it made it go flat. If I slide down to that note, it's really sharp because the friction of my finger is pulling on this string, and once I hold it in place, I've captured extra tension on the string. It's something to be aware of. You can slide the string in or out of tune. You'll probably notice, like, really, really amazing players from the past that were using instruments that are probably even more difficult to sort of keep in tune. Amazing players like Jimi Hendrix and stuff. you can hear him with his fingers pulling notes in tune. Because there are some intervals in the guitar, you know, one tuning doesn't work for every single chord that you play. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But you'll hear them use their hand to pull notes into tune. It's amazing. And it just becomes instinctive for certain players once they do it enough, you know. And so just be aware, like finger pressure, you know, I can play this note if I push on it harder. And sometimes in the heat of the moment when you're really trying to grab for a chord, you can push and pull those notes way out of tune. And so having a soft touch can make a huge, huge difference to just keep the guitar in tune. So there's another issue with all guitars, and I've heard it referred to as string deflection. And so the deflection is the distance of pushing the string down to make contact with the fretboard. And whenever you do that, you're adding more tension, right? Because it's now a longer distance that the string has to travel. And if you feel the tension with your finger, there's less tension here than there is here. When you're closer to the anchor points, there's just more tension there. And so early in the neck, because there's no frets here, is where you get the most of this issue. And so if we have this G string, it's maybe 1 cent sharp. As soon as I push down here, it's a lot sharper. This guitar, this is not the most carefully constructed instrument on the planet, and so it's going to vary a fair amount on this guitar. But that's a good example of the effect. So most of the time, these first frets are going to be a little bit sharp. And depending on the intonation, it should get better as you get higher because there's just less tension that's being introduced to the string. So this one is intonated pretty good. So here, we're sharp by quite a lot. Not nearly as much here. So something to just be aware of. If you're playing down here a lot, you may have to just tune the guitar a little bit under, and sometimes, you know, I'll tune for a specific, you know, fretting on the guitar if I really need that chord to really be in tune, you know. Another thing that I've run into is that on the instrument itself, you know, like most guitars, a lot of guitars will have a couple of pickups. And this is more of an issue with the neck position pickup. And what happens is sometimes you run into this thing where a string sounds out of tune with itself. You hit the string by itself and it's going wheel, 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 wheel. It sounds like it's the beating of two notes that are not perfectly in tune. What can happen is if the pickup is too close to the strings, and this was a huge discovery for me. It was pointed out to me at one point by a guitar tech guy, you know, guitar fixer guy. And what ends up happening is that the magnetic poles of the pickup are pulling on the string that's right above it. And the pull, the actual magnetic pull, goes up exponentially as the string gets closer. And so if you get really close to the string, what ends up happening, so like suppose this is the magnetic pole and the string is vibrating up and down above it. Every time it goes down and gets closer to the magnet, it pulls on it a little bit. And so you get this weird distorted vibration of the string. And so it'll swing further in the down direction. And it can make the string sound like it's out of tune with itself. It messes with the relationship between different octaves of the string. So here, let's do this. We'll do this little example here. I got my screwdriver. And so right now, let's see where we're at here. Yeah, we're pretty close. Yeah, it's pretty darn good. Okay, so I'm going to crank this thing way, way up. Well, actually, here, let's do this. This is part of the example. So there it is. And then the open string. That harmonic and the open string should match each other, always. It's only when you start fretting notes that you start seeing how good the intonation of the guitar is and stuff like that. But the octave should be a good representation. The octave harmonic should be a good representation of the open string. It's matching up really well. So check this out. Crank this way up. Some people like to do this to get a lot of level out of their guitar, but there's definitely problems with it. So now the pickup is just right underneath the string. So already it's pulling it flat. And so now there's a difference between the two octaves. Okay, so let me get it more perfectly in tune. And perfectly in tune for guitars is not really a thing. That's kind of a misnomer. They're never perfectly in tune. Okay, that's about as close as you get. There's the open string. And the pitch is dropping a little bit on the open string. And it's because when you hit the octave harmonic, they are, the vibrations are broken up into two halves, and it's a smaller swing of the string. It's not vibrating as far in each direction. When you do the open string, you can visibly see it on the string. It's just moving further in either direction as it's vibrating. And for that reason, on the downswing of the string, it's getting closer to the magnetic pole of the pickup. And when it does that, the magnet pulls on it a little bit and it slows its upswing. And so it ends up lowering the pitch more on the open than on the octave. I mean, that's like a 4-cent difference between the two. So there's so many tricky little things that can cause confusion with your guitar if it's not really set up right. So I'm going to put this back down to a humane position. And by the way, we're not even listening to that pickup. This is all the bridge pickup, but the magnet of this pickup is affecting the pitch of the string because the magnet was way too close to the string. So the other thing to know is all the pitches are interactive on a guitar. So let's say that's pretty close, within a cent or so. Watch what happens if I add a bunch of tension to the E string. So the E string is way sharp now, and it caused the A string to go flat. Because as you add more tension to this string, it's going to pull harder on the whole neck and body of the guitar and cause it to bow in a little bit more and loosen up the tension on all the other strings. And so if you're in a situation where it's like, oh, okay, this guitar was, tuned to open E, and we want to do tune down for something and tune down to like an open C or something like that, and you tune down the first string to a low C and then start tuning all the other strings down, that first string that you tuned is going to be sharp by the time you get the other ones down, because as you're releasing tension on the other strings, the guitar starts to relax and pull back, and that tension gets added to the first string that you tuned and it goes sharp. And so you can almost never do a huge global tuning change in one round. So here, let me get this guy back to where we were. I'm going to tune past the note a little bit, release the tension from the nut, release the friction from the nut, and tune up to the note. Once we're close, I always like to try and get it So, you know, my last move is just tuning up to the note. And so, yeah, like if I'm going to tune this whole guitar up to F, I'll have to like ballpark the notes first and then fine tune them. Once all the notes are close, but you know, within 5 or 10 cents, then when you're making adjustments, it won't affect the other strings as much. And so you can get a lot closer. It has to be done in 2 rounds. The other thing, when you're tuning and you want to get an accurate read from the tuner, if I just hit the low E string, right now it's reading well enough. But what I do when I'm tuning a guitar is I use these 4 fingers to mute all the other strings, right? So I'm in between these strings. So all 5 of these strings are muted with this hand. Because if you have any other notes ringing, you get these weird jumpy readings. So right now I'm supposed to be reading an E, but it's seeing an A because the other strings are not muted. So it's just a good habit to be in. If you try and tune guitars without muting the other strings, the tuner will just not read as accurately. It'll be jumping around, jumping to other notes. It gets kind of aggravating. So put your fingers on there, mute the other strings, 1 string at a time. When I'm doing the A string, I'll put my thumb on here. All the other 5 strings are totally muted, only here in the A string. It really, really helps the tuner do its job. So the other thing that to be aware of is like, once I get this note in tune, it isn't necessarily going to behave that way depending on how it's being played. Once I start playing, there's an arc to the pitch. And so it'll start sharp. It actually looks a little more like that. Meow, meow. And so if I record a little bit here, so check this out. Okay. Here, let's track this pitch in. So look at that. When I first came in, I hit it really hard. It's way sharp, way sharp. So this is like 15 cents, and all of these attacks are sharp. And here it is hovering up around 10 cents sharp across all these notes. Then here we go. This gets into, now we're on G. All this stuff went sharp as well. So it's definitely something that you have to anticipate. If you're really, I think this comes up more like if you're playing guitars and there's a piano going that's tuned to 440, you have to tune the guitars down a little bit so they'll average out in a place where they'll match up with the piano. Because as soon as you start playing, if you're playing hard at all, it goes sharp. It goes way sharp. Here's here's A, not quite as bad, not having as much of the string deflection. And then down here, we'll go back to E again. And so there's that last note, big, huge, sharp attack, and then it sort of settles down lower. And then it actually settled a bit flat. Let's see if we... Yeah, it still seems like it's in tune, so I don't even know why it ended up under here. But that's that's guitar for you. So there's one other thing that is a huge issue, and I don't think people realize how much of an effect this has. This came up when I was on the tour with Grace, and what was happening is, I would have the guitars in our trailer, and I'd get them all in tune and stuff, and I'd take them out on stage and have her start. This was in the first couple of things, and she'd grab and start playing. They were not in tune. And I realized this over and over again, temperature has a massive effect on the tuning of the guitar. So here we go. We're just going to demonstrate this. And what happens is the temperature, I think, affects, even though this looks like a solid piece of metal, it's made up of all of these tiny little atoms that are bonded together with these, molecular bonds, and they're vibrating based on the temperature in the room. And as the temperature goes up, they vibrate faster and more intensely, and so it starts to expand apart. And so as this string gets hotter, it will expand and the pitch will go down. So check this out. So we're basically in tune. I mean, just 4 or 5 seconds with a hairdryer on there. And it's gone down 30 cents. I mean, it's a huge, huge issue. And so on the tour and in the studio and everywhere, I ended up having to, and what my normal practice is when I'm remembering it, is you got to keep the instrument in the environment that it's going to be in when it's going to be played, because all sorts of things can affect it. So like, as soon as if it's really cold out and you put your hands on the guitar, just the heat from your hands on the strings will cause them to go flat. And it can be a lot. If it's really cold out, the strings will go massively flat as soon as somebody grabs and starts playing it. And so, for live shows, when people are playing, you got to have the guitar in your hand. You're tuning it, keeping it in tune with the guitar tech or the guitar player with their hands on the instrument the whole time, and they walk out on stage with it. And so the temperature of the string stays consistent. It's the same thing in the studio. We'd have this, situations where a guitar tech is set up not in the control room. The control room has a bunch of air conditioning on or whatever, and they'd bring the guitar in and it would go sharp every time because everything would cool off as soon as it went, changed rooms. So temperature, huge, huge deal. Okay, so there it is. There's, I'm sure there's more. There's so many issues with trying to keep guitars in tune, but that's a huge list of, all of the stuff that I've encountered and have helped at least reduce the amount of confusion of like, why the fuck is my guitar out of tune? I just tuned it. And so those things hopefully will help keep the thing in tune. So now, one of the other things that you may run into, people, will bring in instruments to my studio all the time. Amazing, super wonderful, accomplished guitar players, blah, 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 amazing vintage instruments, blah, blah, whatever. And you sit down to record this thing, and it is completely, the intonation is way out. And intonation is important. Here are the basic principles of intonation. So for any of you guitar players out there that already know this, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. So intonation on a guitar, and the word intonation gets used in a lot of contexts, but this is specifically intonating a guitar, and you adjust the saddles to do this. And so a guitar has a particular scale to it. And so Gibsons have a particular scale that they use, and it is the distance between the nut and the saddle of the bridge, and the spacing between each fret is determined by that distance to make sure that these all are, as close as they can, exactly half steps all the way up the guitar. And so you can adjust for that by moving this little saddle piece around. And they give you that so you can, they don't have to commit to anchoring the strings in one exact place and hope that it's always going to be correct for whatever gauge you're using, for whatever height of action you're using. All of those things can affect how the intonation ultimately manifests. And so what you're doing with this adjustment is making sure that the distance So between this 12th fret, between here and the nut, is identical to the distance from this 12th fret to this saddle piece. You want those distances to be exactly the same. And so the way you check that is that when you do the 12th fret harmonic, it will give you the actual exact octave of what this overall string length is. And then when you fret the note, it should match it precisely. If this saddle piece is in the right place, that means it's matched up properly to where the fret is landing. So let's do this. String is close. It's within a cent, so we can work with that. There it is. And then we're going to fret it. It's a tiny bit under. And so that means that the distance between this fret and this saddle piece is a tiny bit too long. And so as you're going up the fretboard, that distance or that inaccuracy gets exaggerated more and more and more because the distance of the frets is smaller and smaller, and any inaccuracy gets exaggerated. And so up here, it's even a little more flat. There we are, the harmonic. There we are, fretting it. It's a little bit down. It's even lower there. So what I want to do is I want to take this saddle piece and move it that way towards the nut, because this distance is too wide between this fret and that saddle piece. So here, let's see if we can actually do this. Try and make this perfect. So I'm going to start adjusting. There's a tiny little screw here, and so this is going to be a clockwise adjustment that'll pull this saddle forward. I don't really have much more room to go. And I always, whenever I make an adjustment like this, because this is a wound string on the guitar, it has ridges to it, and it's a pretty sharp edge in the saddle, and so the ridges can get caught up on the saddle. So I always like to lift it off the saddle after I make an adjustment like this, let it re-center its sort of balance point, and then drop it back down on the saddle. Okay, so we're still basically in tune. Look at that. We're actually might be a little bit sharp now. A little bit sharp, so I'll go back a little bit. Kind of go half what I just did. So there we go. That is a surprisingly well intonated string now. So that's surprisingly in tune as well. So maybe still just going a little bit sharp. Let me go up here. It's really close. That's a really well intonated string. So that's the basic principle. I haven't done all of these to that degree, and so you can see there'll be little bits out. So that one's a little bit under, and so I need to bring that forward a little bit. Yeah, all these are going flat a little bit. And so what ends up happening, if the intonation on the guitar is off, the higher you play on the guitar, the more out of tune it goes. When it's intonated correctly, across the entire fretboard should stay in tune a lot better. And I also find that the whole thing just kind of resonates a little bit better when the intonation is right. I don't know if there's any truth to that, or if that's just me hearing something that's not there, but it seems like the whole thing, all the overtones and everything just fall into place better. The guitar just behaves better when everything is intonated correctly. I'm not going to try and intonate this every single thing perfectly right now. It's a time-consuming process, but I think you get the gist of how to do that. So now, let's talk a little bit about what we're actually tuning for, because that's really complicated. It's not as simple as just putting on your tuner and tuning everything so everything's right in the middle and says it's, you know, exactly on, whatever. And it's just not quite that simple. There's a history to tuning, and I'm only going to cover a little bit of it. I researched it again a little bit just for this episode. It's super complicated, and you know, involves Pythagoras and all these like Greek mathematicians and stuff. So it goes super, super, super deep. As human beings, we're trying to figure out how to tune instruments to be musical, and it was complicated. So I think the really important, significant part of it is the difference between what we generally use now, which is the tempered tuning, and what early on, what is referred to as a just, J-U-S-T, just intonation. And so here's a little bit. I have some information here. Let me see if I can pull all this up and make it work and stuff. Okay. So this shows the difference between the now pretty much globally used chromatic tempered tuning versus just intonation, and it shows you where the differences are. And so just intonation was an early form of tuning that was specifically for the diatonic scale, which is basically just the major scale. Where'd my mouse go? There we go. And so this shows the notes in the scale, and it's based on these simpler mathematical ratios that more accurately represent what these intervals are actually supposed to be. And so when people were doing this, early on when you had a piano and you wanted to play a composition in C major, they would tune the piano to this just intonation for C major. And it sounds beautiful because all of these intervals are optimized to sound really, really musical and very, very sweet. The problem is that then that instrument can only be played in C major. And, pianos and before that clavichords are chromatic instruments. You have all 12 notes in an octave available. And at a certain point, I think people decided, we want to figure out a way to be able to play in any key at any time. And that is when tempered tuning got more popular. But the benefits of just intonation still reveal themselves now. And so you can see it's a huge difference. And the one that we're really going to be dealing with is this one right here. This is the thing that has driven me crazy in my life. That the major third in a chord or in a scale musically wants to be almost like 13.7 cents flat of where the tempered scale puts it. And so what the tempered scale is when people realize, like, we don't want to have to retune our piano every time we want to change, play in a different key. People decided, we're going to come up with a compromise tuning that will work in any key. You can play in any key, and it's just going to be the same amount, a little bit out of tune in every key, and it won't sound quite as sweet as a just intonation, but we can play in whatever key we want. It's close enough. Everybody's happy. Here we go. Tempered tuning. which is this. So you can see what's going on here. And it, you know, I'm going to focus on this right here, this major third. That's where you hear it the most. It's a real problem. And, you know, the fourths and fifths are really close. They're only 2 cents away from where you would have it with the tempered tuning. So fourths and fifths generally work great in the tempered tuning. It's just these thirds in here that are such a problem. Okay, so let's try and get this guitar in tune. Okay, that looks good. I generally feel like once you're within a cent, that's about as close as you're gonna get. I'm muting all the other strings as I'm tuning. It helps the tuner read more accurately. So there's that. Pesky G string looks good. Here's the B string. Let's get that perfectly in tune. There we go, looks good. Looks good. Okay. Pretty good. So, and that really is the string, the open strings in tune. And let's say when I'm playing this E chord, I'm leaving out the major third right now. Sounds pretty good. Pretty good. You do have an issue here that when I fret this note, it's not the same as the open tuning. It's actually going flat. I think when they scaled the frets on this guitar, they're actually trying to compensate for the string deflection, and I think they went too far with it. So that one's going sharp, or it's just inaccurate fret placement. This is not an expensive instrument. So you have these issues to deal with. This note fretted is not matching the open note. So you can hear it a little bit. A little bit of movement in there. Okay, so here's the problem. You ready for this? Well, that doesn't sound very good. It's in tune. It's actually even leaning in the direction that we want. That major thirds does not sound sweet at all. It sounds sharp. And that's because with this tempered tuning, it wants to be 13 cents flat. And so here, check this one out. This is another. So here's the major third, showing the same thing here. This is the number of cents. So if C is 0 cents, D wants to be a little bit above at 4 cents sharp. E right here wants to be 14 cents flat. So let's see what that sounds like. So right now we got this. Not awesome. That feels good. So that's what a major third is supposed to sound like. Nice. So that's the difference in how they sound. It took a long time for me to get there, so we probably, you know, it's hard to even remember what the other one sounded like. That's what a major third is supposed to sound like. Here, we'll put this back real quick. So this is when the tuner is saying the string is in tune. It sounds terrible. It drove me nuts forever. So that's the issue. So now we know major thirds sound better when they're flat by a certain amount. Here's the problem with the guitar. So I have a little thing that I'm going to play here that will sort of illustrate this. But let's say we're playing a sequence of chords that use the G string for different notes in the chord. So this is great if I'm playing, well, right now I'm tuned for it to be, it's way sharp now. Let's get it closer. There, finally, all of that tension that was stuck in the nut finally let go. And we're way flat now. So there we go. So this works great if I'm playing any of these chords. Not great for that chord. Or if I play any of the chords where the G string is playing the major third in the chord are a problem now. But it sounds in tune for this stuff. Right? So what do? There's no way you can get it so this chord and this chord are really going to sound sweet. So you can kind of average it out. And so if you're really just trying to play through a song, and so this is how I approach it for live stuff, because you can't stop and punch and do anything to try and address this. You just average it out. Based on the chords that are going to be playing, I kind of nudge the strings in one direction or another a little bit. And so what I would do is, you get a little bit of help here, because this string, see, it's flatter when it's open than when it's fretted. So that's actually going to help me a little bit. So that's about as good as we're going to get with the major third on the G string, while still having it in tune when it's just playing an octave or playing a fifth. So this is a good average right here. It's about as close as you're going to get. And what's happening is it's tuned flat. So in this case, on this particular guitar, it actually is helping me a little bit. This first fret is a little bit flat compared to this second fret. And so I could actually even go a little flatter. And this will fall into place. Let's see if I can get it there. There we go. So now, the E is reasonably in tune, and the A, the fifth for the A, is reasonably in tune. So that's one way you can go. You can try and average it out, work with string deflection, work with the things that are moving in pitch on the guitar depending on where you're fretting on stuff to try and actually have things fall into place. That will only get you so far. There's some strings that are much more problematic, like the B string wants to be the major third for this A chord. It sounds terrible, right? And it is basically in tune. It's 1 cent sharp. Sounds atrocious. So let's go down. That's what a major third's supposed to sound like. Right? Here's the problem. You go to play D, super flat for that note. It's playing an octave. So, what do you do? What are you going to do? Well, this is what I've done on projects where the tuning, there's a sequence of chords, and you want to have all of them really sound sweet. You want all of them to be optimized to sound as good as they possibly can. What I end up doing is tuning the guitar for a particular type of chord shape that you're playing. So right now I'm tuned for that, right? So if I was playing like the D chord here and playing this A chord, I'm tuned great for those two chords. So I would do a pass where I'd really just be focusing on capturing those two chords that are in the progression. And then I would retune the guitar. So let's tune this up. Okay, so that's basically right. And I'm going to tune the G string back down. More than that. Yeah, somewhere around there. It's still. Okay. It's such a pesky note. Oh my God. Drives me nuts. So there we go. That sounds good there. So if I'm playing all of those will be in tune. And so I do a pass where I'm catching all of those chords. And you know, typically this is when I'm engineering and there's a guitar player that's playing, and so if I'm recording on a tape machine, I'll punch in for this chord, for this chord, for that chord, and then we do another pass where I optimize the tuning for the A and the D, and I'll punch in those chords. And so you can get it in a couple of passes if you just punch in and out for the chords, you know, that you're tuned for. And there's a tuning that will work for a combination of chords. So we're going to go through this process. I have a little thing that we can record. And I'm going to do it a couple ways so we can kind of get the idea of, you know, what the potential benefits are of doing this punching thing. So we'll do it first where this is kind of like how I'd approach it live if there's no punching, or if you don't really want the tuning to be super, super exactly perfect for every chord. You can average things out so it'll, you know, just do the best you can on all the different chords. So this is what I have here. You know, all the ones and the fours and fives are pretty much straight on, you know. So everybody's pretty in tune. This one I have to do a little bit lower because when I fret it on this guitar, it goes quite a bit sharp. So this one I'm tuning the open string a little bit under. Okay, and then the pesky G string, it's a little under, but when I fret the second fret, it's a lot closer to being dead on. So it's the issues with the string deflection and this particular guitar is actually working with me a little bit here. So I can play that, and the octave actually is in tune, and the fifth is pretty in tune there. So that's a little better average. So so here we go. The chords I'm going to be playing, that. I'm going to try and grab this thing. It's about as good as that gets averaged. I'm going to be playing first position A major, that C9 chord, and then just a conventional D chord. So I'm going to try and get, this is about as good as it can get, just averaging everything out. And then I'll go back and I'll do the version where, I tune for each chord and sort of punch through it. So let's do a pass. Just averaged out here. Here we go. His drums are courtesy of Mark O'Connell, Taking Back Sunday. Thanks, Mark. He doesn't even know he's letting me borrow these, but there you go. Thanks. So you get the idea there. I'm going to do a double of that just so you can all hear it in context and whatnot. I probably won't show all of this stuff. Just fast forward through it or whatever. You get the idea. It's just me trying to play guitar. Here we go. Here's the double. Okay, so there you go. There it is, doubled with just averaging things out. And you can really hear where you get into trouble. This one, that major third is not awesome. That major third is not awesome. That G sounds flat now. Not too bad. And then this D, this string is flat, that one's sharp. They just don't sound sweet, but it's as close as you can get averaging things out. Now, we're going to optimize the tuning for each chord shape. So let's see, we're going to call this the bar chord style. Not the bra chord, as lovely as that might be. Okay, so we're going to really get the tuning dialed for that chord, that chord, that chord. It's a lot of this. So this needs to come down. So we'll go for that. So I'm going to play through it again. Turn off this other one. And I'm only going to be keeping on this pass those three chords. Yeah, those chords. Feels good. Okay, here we go. I don't even need to play past there because the rest of them are definitely going to be a different tuning. Okay, so then we'll double that while I'm set up with the tuning. Dun, 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 dun. So guitar 2, these are bar chords. Okay. Let's see if our tuning held up here. This one's a little under, but that's good. This could come up a little. Yeah, this actually probably improved it a little bit. That's really good. Okay, here we go. For the double. Okay, as far as I need to go. So now we'll tune for some other chords. I'm going to get this up. And this needs to come down. Okay, so that feels good. So then that's the other chord that I would grab with this tuning. Come up a little bit there. And so the other thing, I'm just gonna focus on this chord because this one hard for me to grab with my big fat fingers. So I'm just gonna leave it set up and get a real clean thing happening. So. So then we'll go right here for the A. Okay, so now we'll double that. Still sounds good. Here we go, quick. Okay, I think I think we got A and D. Great. So I'm just going to be punching this last bit here. We'll create a new track for this. This is a very specific tuning for this. So this is going to be the the C chord, C9 chord. So that just happens right in the end here. A little bit. So you can tell the A and the D sound terrible, but that sounds great. So that's what we're keeping on there. Okay, so then we go one more here. We're gonna do this guy. Do 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 do. C chord. Ba, 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 da. Here we go. And I go ahead and play the other chords, even though they're distractingly out of tune. Play those so just like the punches and everything will sound like you played through. Okay, so I got one more to do. This is going to be the D chord. Da, 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 da. So call this thing the D chord. Da, 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 D chord. And it's important to understand that, like, if I was recording this with somebody else playing, I would just be punching this live, you know, and so I just have one track going. I wouldn't be playlisting at all. Somebody else is playing the guitar, and so we'd tune for the first thing. They just play through the whole thing, and then tune for the A and this other D chord, the 5th fret D chord, and we would just, I'd hit play, I'd punch those two chords, and so it goes a lot faster. If somebody else is playing and I'm engineering, so I can just punch in and out where I need the chords that we're tuned for. But this is a little more complicated process here. Okay, now I'm going to try and get the D chord in tune. So we gotta have A in tune here. There we go. That's good. So it's, real close. G is still my problem. There it is. Okay, here we go. The D chord. Okay, so there's that side. We'll do the other side now. Here we go. Okay, so now we have all the bits that we need. So let me set this up so you can see what I'm going to do here. So in each of these tracks, I'm going to go back to the bar chord pass. That's this one. And that's what we'll actually comp this together on. A and D chords, I grab from this track. So that one goes up there. So then we get the A chord. So we do this one, the A chord, right? A chord, A chord. Okay, and so then here's the C chord. So we go right here. This guy right there. Then here's the D chord. I gotta get it off the D chord track though. Here and then here, like that. And I probably, I'm gonna take the little wicka chickas off of that first main pass, because that one I just played through. I probably should have kept those on the bar chord pass. So I think this is right. Okay, so then we do the same thing on this doubling pass, right? Yeah, so we've got this guy here. Okay, so we go here. And we'll start with bar chord pass right here. Just start plugging stuff in. So A and D chords. So here's this. It's a little easier to see where I'm going now. Boom, that goes there. And then here we go. Here's the A chord. That goes there. This goes here. And then the last A chord. Bam. Okay, so then I'm going to grab the little chickas from this pass. Okay, so then here's the C chord. So what's going on here? I'm missing things. Yeah, so I guess I should get all of that. And then all of this, and then here's the D chords. Okay. Oh, I messed this one up. this one. And there's some, you know, some cleanup to do on these punches. I'm kind of leaning ahead a little bit in how I'm playing this, so I would have to figure this out. So, yeah, well, let's see. I guess I probably should do this now. So, so we'll go something like that. Match this up. That's probably close enough. Okay, and then let's just select the whole thing. We'll put some fades on here. I think I'm going to center these, and let's make them equal power. So we have our two versions here, so we can all hear the difference. And it's surprising, like when you're just playing through something, you can kind of get away with a lot, and all of that effort, you know, it does sound more in tune. It's very, very, you know, every single chord sort of sings in this very musical, sort of sweeter way. But check it out. So this is our original pass where I just sort of averaged the tuning to try and make that work. So listen to this. Not too bad. You know, you really kind of hear it more right at the end when that A chord is sustaining out. It sticks out a little more. So now let's go to our bar chord passes where we have everything comped together. So this is like these sections are tuned for the bar chords. I'm playing all bar chord stuff there, and then this was tuned for the D chord and the A chord. So this is like this is the A chord. This is the A chord, and then we did special tuning for the C and that first position D chord. So, so check out what this sounds like. So, you know, you get the idea. Definitely the chords ring much sweeter, especially in that last section. You know, the bar chords you kind of get away with. It was probably close enough with the averaging that there wouldn't be that much of a difference there. And so, I mean, that process, it feels unbelievably tedious to go through that right now with a video camera on me. It was, I mean, I'm going to speed it up so it's not excruciatingly boring while you guys were watching it. But, you know, at least it's like a method. And so if you go through the steps and are meticulous about it, you will end up with something that is very, very in tune. There are performance issues with the punched one. I have to clean up those punches and stuff, and you deal with like having to marry together different performances, and if I was leaning a little ahead, a little behind in places, I would go through and sort of finesse some of that stuff. Didn't want to spend time doing that now. This was really, you know, all about the tuning. And so so that's really the way that I ultimately ended up with for trying to get every single chord to really have this more like just intonation type tuning. There's really no other way to get a guitar to do it. So I just want to talk a little bit about the tuning app that I like to use on the phone. I used real actual hardware Peterson strobe tuners for a long time, and this thing has some really cool stuff on it. It has these, you can put in these different intonations. So it has like what I was just tuning to manually was this just major intonation right here. And so you can set up different tuning temperaments in the tuner itself, and just let it, tune that major third where it's supposed to be. You'd have to put in the correct key and all of that stuff to make sure you're doing it right. And it also has these sweeteners in here. That's kind of cool. I played around with a couple of these. They're generally what they're doing, like in here. If we go back to sweeteners, guitar and bass. So like there's one here for this ACU one. It's for acoustic guitar, and generally what it's doing is it's leaning the lower strings a little bit under and the higher strings more dead on the pitch. So when you start playing harder, the lower strings tend to go sharp more so than the higher strings. So it's trying to compensate for that and compensate for the string deflection stuff, where you start grabbing and pulling on the strings, they average out as going a little more sharp. So it tunes those a little bit lower. So it has some cool stuff like this. If anybody from Peterson is watching this thing, I would love to be able to make my own custom tuning temperaments. That would be amazing for this app, and I could set it up so for a particular guitar, I could tune the G string exactly where I want it, so I can play bar chords and the major third will sound right and all that stuff. It doesn't actually do that. I wish it did. But it's an amazing app. It's incredibly precise for tuning. There's a bazillion tuning apps out there, and I'm sure all of them work fine. This one does a lot of stuff. You obviously have to pay for it, but I think, I used the hardware version for a long time. That thing was insanely expensive. This is, I don't know what it is, 20 or 30 bucks or something. It's a fraction of the cost of the other one. And the amount of information that it gives you, the level of accuracy is really incredible. So this is definitely the thing I always use when I'm tuning stuff. And you can get a little jack to plug into it, so you can plug your guitar directly into it to tune as well. So that's basically it. That sort of covers everything. Yeah, I think we covered it all. So as always, if you find this useful, I'll throw the little QR codes up there again. You can throw me a tip, whatever. But there you go. There's the exhaustive, insane dive into trying to keep guitars in tune and dealing with the pesky major third. So, all right, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye. Check, 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 check. Fuck you, you suck, you fucking piece of shit. Hello? Ooh.